In this video, we'll be looking at the cards which give you the biggest amount of life points a single time, with cards that are essentially not repeatable after you use them once. And at number 10, we have Morphtronic Telefon. This is a level 1 tuner which has the effect where if it's in attack position, you can roll a 6-sided die in order to gain life points equal to the result times 100. Then special summon a Morphtronic monster from your graveyard, which has a level less than or equal to the result. So if you roll a 6, you get to gain 600 life points. Now, while this may not seem very impressive, anyone who's played competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Should immediately figure out why this card is on this list. You see, its first effect is what we call a soft once per turn, which means if the card is removed from the field or flipped face down, and then comes back, you can use the effect again. Or if you have 3 copies of the card on board, each copy will be able to use the effect once. So, if you have a way to bring back Morphtronic Telefon to the field over and over, you can actually gain a whole bunch of life points in one turn. And there's one card which is able to bring back Morphtronic Telefon from the graveyard multiple times a turn. And that card is a second copy of Morphtronic Telefon. Because you see, Telefon is a level 1 Morphtronic monster, and Telefon neglects to exclude other copies of itself from its first effect. So no matter what result you roll, you will always be able to summon another copy of Morphtronic Telefon from your graveyard. So if you simply have a way to keep using your Morphtronic Telefon in the field in order to send it to the graveyard, with say something like a Link Summon, then you'd be able to use the effect multiple times in a single turn. Or if you simply have something like Cannon Soldier, you can even FTK your opponent by bringing back Morphtronic Telefon over and over. But if you simply use them for Link Summons, you can easily gain over 5,000 life points by just going through a combo. A combo that you can generally only do once per duel, because you'll simply run out of extra monsters to do it again on your next turn. But technically, you can use Morphtronic Telefon's effect every turn. So it's at number 10 simply because it can be repeated.
We're under attack. Quick, what should we do, boss?
We only have enough time to send out one message. Quick, let me message this chicken VTuber a chat. Hey, do you like food?
What? Yeah, I like food.
Do you like food, but hate having to make trips to the grocery store and buying all the ingredients for a recipe, only to end up with all kinds of leftover food?
We don't have time for this. Why are you bugging them with questions about food?
Is this a prank?
This is not a joke at all. HelloFresh helps you with the meal planning so you can save stress, with 45 plus recipes and even more market items that support your lifestyle. Plus, when you sign up for HelloFresh, you get free dessert for life. Make restaurant quality meals at home topped off with a decadent sweet treat. Get 1 free dessert item per box while your subscription is active.
So, please stop messing around and call for help.
No more staring blankly at the fridge, wondering what to make for dinner. Give HelloFresh a try and choose from 30 plus calorie smart or protein smart recipes each week. Packed with fresh ingredients, everything arrives pre-portioned and right at your doorstep for less hassle and more And the best part? When you try HelloFresh, you'll unlock free dessert for life. That's right, satisfy your sweet tooth with free dessert items in every box for as long as your subscription is active.
Can someone ban this guy from my chat for self-promo?
Hurry, make a real call. We might still have time.
Thanks to HelloFresh for sponsoring today's video. Go to hellofresh.com/TheDuelLogs, use my code DuelLogs16FM, and receive 16 free meals plus free dessert for life when the subscription is active. And at number 9, we have Supremacy Berry. This card simply has the ability where if your life points are lower than your opponent's, you gain 2,000 life points. However, if your life points are higher than your opponent's, you instead take 1,000 damage. Now, anyone who plays Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Link should be very familiar with this card, or at the very least, very early Duel Links. You see, in Duel Links, there are a series of skills which allow you to do extra things outside of your deck. And a lot of these skills are based on how many life points you have. In one of the earliest meta decks, there was a skill called 3-star Demotion, which once per turn allowed you to pay 2,000 life points in order to reduce the levels of all monsters in your hand by 3 for the turn, which basically meant you got to normal summon a level 7 monster without tributes. And since the starting life point value in Duel Links is only 4,000, this means you'd only be able to use this skill a single time per duel, unless you had a way to gain some life points. And Supremacy Berry would allow you to use it for basically every Supremacy Berry you drew thereafter, since the skill itself would basically make sure you had less life points than your opponent, and would also allow you to pay for the skill multiple times throughout a duel. Eventually, 3-star Demotion got nerfed into the ground, but there were still other skills in the game which required life point totals to be at weird values. Supremacy Berry was used with skills like Ojama Go in order to create tokens on your opponent's side of the field in order to stall them out, and also with the Destiny Draw, which allowed you to draw any card in your deck every time you lost exactly 2,000 or more life points, but only once per turn. So with Supremacy Berry, you could use the effect more than once per duel. Eventually though, all of these skills got nerfed, and there isn't really a way to take advantage of Supremacy Berry in modern Duel Links. And obviously, Supremacy Berry never saw play in actual Yu-Gi-Oh! Because the effect is just sadly not impactful enough to do anything there. And at number 8, we have Draining Shield. This is a battle trap, which allows you to negate an attack and then gain life points equal to that monster's attack who declared the attack. So if your opponent has a really strong monster on the side of the field, you can gain a whole bunch of life points with this one effect. Additionally, there are ways in order to make sure you gain even more from this. There's a card in the game called Massive Morph, which allows you to double the attack and defense of one of your opponent's monsters, but that monster can no longer attack you directly. This attack gain is permanent, so if you give your opponent a really strong monster like Lava Golem, it will now have 6,000 attack, which means you can gain 6,000 life points if you stop that attack with your Draining Shield. You can go even further though, as there's a card called Casamolar, which can cause a monster to gain attack equal to its original attack. So if you use Casamolar and Lava Golem and then Massive Morph, it will have 12,000 attack, which means you gain 12,000 life points from a Draining Shield. And this was kind of the strategy used in Duel Links, and was such an effective strategy in the game that Massive Morph is still limited to one copy in Duel Links to this day. Although Casamolar was never really used in Duel Links combos, as I'm not even sure if that card is in the game yet. There are other cards like Draining Shield that will allow you to double up on giving your opponent huge amounts of attacks with Massive Morph. There's also Enchanted Javelin, which allows you to gain life points equal to the attack of an attacking monster. However, if the attack is direct, it's basically just stopping the attack by getting life points back that you're about to lose. So you only gain life points from Enchanted Javelin if you use it when they're attacking a defensive position monster or a monster which doesn't take battle damage. There's also Damage Vaccine Omega Max, which allows you to gain life points equal to the damage or card effect damage you take. Rainbow Life, which allows you to gain life points equal to the damage you would have taken. And then there's Nutrient Z, which allows you to gain 4,000 life points if you would take 2,000 more points of battle damage. And out of all of these cards, Draining Shield is easily the best of the bunch, because it also negates the attack instead of only giving you life points. And also doesn't have a discard cost like Rainbow Life, which would have been the best one if it wasn't for that cost. However, since this is a battle trap, it's astronomically too slow for modern Yu-Gi-Oh! And is kind of a newbie card that seems better than it really is, which is why Draining Shield is only at number 8. And at number 7, we have Joruri-P.U.N.K Dangerous Gabu. This is a trap card which can negate the effect of a monster until the end of the turn. And also, if you control a Punk monster, you can additionally gain life points equal to that monster's attack. However, it only increases your life points by that monster's original attack, so you can't do fun combos like Massive Morph in order to gain a whole bunch of life points. But unlike Draining Shield, Dangerous Gabu is actually useful, because it's part of the Punk archetype. You see, the Punk archetype is a very good engine that fits into pretty much any deck. It allows you to easily go into rank 8 monsters, level 8 synchros, and level 11 synchros, and a whole bunch of other things, all without a normal summon, assuming you draw into an emergency teleport or a deer note in your hand. However, one of the Punk monsters, Joruri-P.U.N.K Madam Spider, has the ability to pay 600 life points to add a Punk trap card from your deck to your hand. So if your combo goes into Spider, you can then search out Dangerous Gabu, and easily have access to this negate. And of all of the Punk spells and traps, Gabu does actually see some competitive play with them, because generally speaking, being able to negate one of your opponent's monsters is actually a good effect. In fact, this is probably the best card on this list in terms of modern Yu-Gi-Oh! However, this list is about rating based off of burst of life points, and sadly, most Punk engine combos don't end on a Punk monster. They generally go into generic Synchro or Xyz monsters. So if you do get access to Gabu, chances are you won't even gain the life points associated to it, and you just use it to negate an effect, which is not what this list is about. And at number 6, we have Gizmek Okami, the dreaded Deluge Dragon. This is a level 10 monster with really high stats, which can special summon itself from your hand if there are 2 or more special summon monsters from the extra deck on the field, counting both yours and your opponent's. Then while it's on the field, you can pay 1500 life points to destroy all monsters on the field that were special summoned from the extra deck, but you can only attack with one monster for the rest of this turn. So the conditions to bring this card out are to have a lot of extract monsters in the field already. So ideally, if your opponent has 2 or more out, Deluge Dragon will be able to wipe them all out. So it has a really good effect, even if its summon conditions are kind of strict. However, the reason it's on this list is for its last effect, where if this card is sent from the field to the graveyard by your opponent, you can banish one monster from your opponent's graveyard to then gain life points equal to its attack. So if you send one of your opponent's big, strong extract monsters to the graveyard with its effect, you can then banish one of those cards in order to gain a whole bunch of life points. However, since it's only the original attack of the monster, chances are you won't gain more life points than something like Draining Shield, or you can manipulate the totals better. But this is a life point gain effect tied to a pretty good generic main deck monster, which will actually be able to do something useful on top of giving you a bunch of life points, which is why it makes this list and even kind of high at number 6. And at number 5, we have Side Effects. This is a trap card which requires your opponent to declare how many cards they wish to draw from their deck, minimum of 1 up to 3. And based on how many cards they decide to draw, you gain 2,000 life points per card. So if your opponent draws the maximum amount, you gain 6,000 life points with this one card, which is how many life points will be gained in the example of Draining Shield, stopping a massive morphed up lava golem, which is a huge amount. Probably one of the biggest amounts you can get generically from a card on this list without having to jump through too many hoops. However, the downside is that your opponent gets to draw 3 cards, which is kind of huge. This card literally puts you at -4 in card advantage, so you better have a way to take advantage of those life points that you just gained. But what's really funny about Side Effects is that most players will only ever draw 1 card from the effect, so it's only a -2 most of the time, which isn't as insurmountable as a -4. Now, you might be wondering why that is. If you had the option to draw 1 to 3 cards, naturally, you would always want to draw 3 cards, because drawing is one of the best effects in Yu-Gi-Oh! Because of its lack of a resource system. Those 3 cards could be hand traps, starters, more extenders, or more ways to draw even more cards. It is just incredibly disadvantageous to let your opponent to draw so many cards. So why is it that so many people only ever draw 1 card when you use Side Effects on them? Well, because if you're hitting your opponent with a card that's giving them a seemingly really good advantage for just giving you life points, they're going to get really cautious about why you're giving them such a really good deal to only gain life points. And because so many people are so untrusting of their opponent, they will pick the minimum amount almost every time, even though life point values don't really matter in competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! That's why most life point gain effects are really bad, because unless they do something else like Deluge Dragon or Dangerous Gabu, they're just not worth running. So it's really funny that a majority of players that you use Side Effects against will only ever draw a single card off of it, because they just inherently do not trust what you're going to do with those extra life points. Or at least that's my experience whenever I use the card in Master Duel, which always surprises me, because I just assume people would always want to draw 3 cards no matter what. And at number 4, we have Try and Guess. This is a trap card which has the effect to gain 3,000 life points. However, with a twist, you have to declare an extra deck card type between Fusion, Synchro, and Xyz, and then both players reveal their extra decks. And whichever player has more cards of the declared type will gain 3,000 life points. So as long as your deck is just full of fusion monsters, for example, chances are your opponent's deck is not going to be a full 15 fusion monster pile as well, and you can almost guarantee to gain life points this way, unless your opponent is playing something like a branded build that has 0 link monsters. Conversely, if you're playing a Nurse Burn deck, where you're converting your opponent's life point gains into damage, you can just fill your extra deck with nothing but link monsters in order to guarantee that your opponent will gain life points, because link monster is not one of the options that you're allowed to call, and it doesn't check for them. So as long as you know your opponent has at least one of the other 3 types in their extra deck at all, you'll be able to guarantee that they gain 3,000 life points, in order to make sure that they take 3,000 points of damage with bad reaction to Samachi's effect. And this is kind of a cornerstone of Nurse Burn decks, but it can also be used to give yourself 3,000 life points as well. And it's one of the highest amounts you can reliably give yourself from a single card that doesn't require any other combo cards, without too many other downsides. And at number 3, we have Destruct Potion. This is a trap card which allows you to gain life points equal to the attack of 1 monster on your side of the field. However, it also destroys the monster in order to gain those life points. Now, anyone who plays Master Duel probably recognizes this card, because it's used in an FTK by bots in order to win in 1 turn. The combo goes as follows. You go into number 99 Utopia Dragonar, use its effect to bring out number 100 Numeron Dragon, use Numeron Dragon's effect to gain 13,000 attack points, then on your opponent's turn, summon out number 43 Manipulator Souls, then use Destruct Potion in order to destroy your own Numeron Dragon to gain 13,000 life points, and Manipulator Souls has the ability where, once per turn, when you gain life points, you inflict that amount of life points as damage to your opponent as well. So you'll deal 13,000 points of damage to your opponent, which means you'll be able to win before your opponent enters their first main phase. Now, there is another card with this life point gain effect called Mystic Walk, which is a quick play spell which allows you to tribute a monster to gain life points equal to that monster's attack or defense, whichever one you choose. And it also works on the monster's current attack on the field, just like Destruct Potion, so technically can be used with the FTK as well. The reason Destruct Potion is more associated with this combo though, is because it's a trap card and 10 times easier to search than Mystic Walk. So other copies of Trap Trick or even Trap Track allowed you to start a Destruct Potion in order to make this FTK as consistent as possible. But you can also just play 3 copies of Mystic Walk to guarantee that you get the effect, because it's a quick play spell card. So it can also be used during your opponent's turn in order to pull off the combo. And really, this combo is the ultimate way in order to take advantage of gaining a whole bunch of life points in one chunk. And since Destruct Potion is used in this FTK, it's kind of the king of this kind of effect. However, only because it works specifically with this FTK. We do have 2 other cards on this list that are ahead of it for different reasons. And at number 2, we have the Ascendant of Thunder. This is a level 7 monster which allows you to special summon it from your hand by paying 3,000 life points. Additionally, if it's summoned this way and then it's destroyed by your opponent, you gain 5,000 life points, and neither of its effects are once per turn. So if you have 3 copies of this card in your hand, you can pay 9,000 life points to bring them all out. Well, as long as you have the extra life points to bring them out, that is. And then if it's destroyed, you gain 5,000 life points, netting you 2,000 life points total when you count its cost in order to be brought out. However, if we're looking at just the biggest chunk of life points you can gain without any other kinds of combos or setups, Ascendant of Thunder is one of the single largest amounts you can gain at 5,000, while also being a good card, unlike its counterpart, the Immortal of Thunder, which only gave you 3,000 life points and made you lose 5,000 life points when it went to the graveyard. And the Ascendant of Thunder has actually seen competitive play, but not because of its ability to gain life points, and entirely because of its ability to be a generically special summonable level 7 from your hand, which only requires you to pay life points to bring it out, rather than having conditions, which is a lot more valuable than you would think. Most cards that can special summon themselves from the hand only do so under very strict conditions, those conditions usually involving their archetype in some way, but the Ascendant of Thunder only requires a life point cost, which means it can extend any plays that need a level 7 monster on board for something. And at number 1, we have Performapal Kuribohble. This is a hand trap which can only be activated when your opponent declares a direct attack, in which case you special summon this card from your hand and change the attack to this card instead. Then, if you take any battle damage from that battle, instead of taking life point damage, you gain that much life points. So it's kind of like Rainbow Life in a hand trap form. And remember how I said Rainbow Life would be much better than Draining Shield if it didn't have its cost? Well, this is basically what Kuribohble is. You see, hand traps are infinitely more valuable than actual trap cards, because they're safe in your hand, and 10 times easier to use since you don't have to commit them to the board or wait a turn before using them. So while Kuribohble and Draining Shield technically have a very similar effect of blinking one attack and gaining life points from it, Kuribohble is better because it's a hand trap. So you'll actually be able to use the effect in a real duel, unlike Draining Shield, which will just get destroyed before the battle phase even begins. Also, hand traps are usable immediately as soon as you get them. So if you draw into Kuribohble during the battle phase, like through the effect of Backup Squad, you'll be able to use it immediately during that battle phase, unlike Draining Shield, which would be stuck dead in your hand, waiting for you to set it on your next turn and then be usable on the turn after that. The fact that it's a hand trap with a really good effect just makes this card better than anything else that has a similar effect to it, and is also usable with all the same combos as Draining Shield, where you can Massive Morph and cast a Muller the monster in order to double or quadruple the attack, in order to gain a whole bunch of life points. Or if your opponent is using something like Blue Eyes Chaos Max Dragon, you could take advantage of the fact that this is a monster, and summon it in defense position in order to take double piercing damage and gain nearly 8,000 life points without having to do anything else. So out of all the cards in this list, this is the easiest one to use, and will also gain you a whole bunch of life points. But it won't gain you the most amount of life points in a single burst that's entirely controlled by you, as that's probably still Destruct Potion with Numeron Dragon. Alright, and that's the list. If there are any other big life point card gains you think I may have missed, or if you have any ideas for future videos just like this one, please let us know down in the comments below.